What would you do if, in just a few hours, an elite club built on prejudice was brought crashing down by the very person they despise the most? At Riverside Fishing Club, the exclusive haven for the ultra-wealthy, a stranger showed up this morning. A middle-aged black man, dressed in a faded shirt, carrying an old, weathered fishing rod, walked slowly toward the gate. The stares rained down on him like a hailstorm of contempt. VIP areas off limits to commoners. Kurt Benson, the arrogant club manager, announced loudly. Members chuckled mockingly. Some pulled out their phones, eager to capture the spectacle like it was a live circus. But when the man silently pulled out a black card and the scanner beeped, the entire club fell into stunned silence. No one knew that a storm was about to break loose. And this man, he wasn't just here to fish. Don't look away. The truth behind this faded shirt will bring the Riverside Fishing Club to its knees. Stay tuned for the next part. The morning sun shimmered over the still lake, the water glistening like a giant mirror. Down the cobblestone driveway leading into Riverside Fishing Club, the private paradise reserved for billionaires, luxury SUVs lined up one after another. Tailored suits, designer dresses, smug smiles. And then, thus sitting, a jarring sight appeared. A black man, well into his 50s, wearing a faded button-down shirt, worn-out jeans, dust-covered shoes, and carrying a scratched-up fishing rod that looked like it had been rescued from a thrift shop. He walked steadily toward the checkpoint, where Kurt Benson, clad in a razor-sharp Italian suit, stood like a gatekeeper to another world. Kurt sneered openly, not bothering to hide his disdain. "Stop right there," he barked, voice sharp as a blade. Around them, heads turned, smirks widened. A woman in a Chanel dress whispered, "Probably here to apply for janitorial work." Kurt crossed his arms, blocking the entrance. "This area is for VIP members only. We don't allow strays." The man said nothing. He simply nodded and pulled out a small card from his breast pocket. A black, metallic card, no name, just a single crowned emblem. Kurt raised an eyebrow, smirked, and swiped the card across the scanner. Beep, see. The scanner flashed green. The air froze solid. People glanced around, confused and rattled. You could hear the rustle of a page turning from across the courtyard. Kurt forced a stiff smile, scrambling to regain control. "Apologies. We just have strict dress codes." The man gave a slight nod, his eyes sweeping past Kurt, past the murmuring crowd, weighing each face, each judgment. He said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply stepped past Kurt, making his way down to the marina, leaving a trail of stunned, embarrassed stares in his wake. At the dock, members clustered around million-dollar yachts, showing off fishing rods that cost as much as luxury apartments. At the far end, tucked away among the trees, the man found a quiet spot. He unfolded an old camping chair, set down his battered tackle box, threaded a yellowed fishing line through the rod. Nobody invited him into their conversations. Nobody approached. They just watched him like a stain on their otherwise gleaming paradise. A young man wearing a club logo blazer muttered to his friend, "Give it a few minutes. Security will toss him out." Snickers spread, low and eager, like a gathering storm. But the man paid no mind. He sat there, rooted. His deep brown eyes stared out across the glittering lake, as if waiting for something. Maybe a fish, or maybe something far bigger. A soft breeze stirred. The faded cap on his head fluttered gently. And no one knew, that within a few short hours, this quiet figure, this man they dismissed, it would turn the Riverside Fishing Club upside down. The morning drifted on as the serene lake was disturbed by million-dollar yachts gliding across the water, leaving behind proud, sweeping wakes. The atmosphere at Riverside Fishing Club quickly turned lively, but it was as suffocating as a high society party disguised behind expensive fishing rods. In a secluded corner of the marina, the man in the faded shirt, still silent, attached bait to his hook with slow, masterful movements. The old rod in his hand seemed like an extension of his body, moving with effortless grace. But the eyes never left him. Not far away, Kurt Benson stood with his arms crossed beside a group of loyal club members, his lips curling into a look of disdain. "Unbelievable," a blonde woman chewing gum said with a smack. "Who lets someone dressed like that into the VIP section?" "This club is going downhill," scoffed a portly old man. "I'm paying $50 hours a year to sit next to that." Kurt heard it all, and he swallowed their words like fuel for his ambition. His eyes gleamed with calculation. He leaned in toward a young security guard and whispered, "Keep a close watch on him. The moment he slips up, we'll have a reason to kick him out." Just one small mistake, one misstep, and Kurt was ready to pounce. At the dock, the man in the faded shirt carefully cast his line into the water with a gentle, nearly soundless flick of his wrist. The rod vibrated lightly in his hand, the line slicing out in a perfect arc, an action so smooth that even seasoned anglers would have nodded in admiration. If only they'd bothered to watch with fair eyes. But they didn't. They saw only the old clothes. They saw only the color of his skin. They saw only a lesser being sitting awkwardly amid their world of privilege. A young boy in a Ralph Lauren polo shirt, the son of a wealthy businessman, stood nearby and laughed loudly. "Mommy, that guy is fishing with a toy." The surrounding crowd erupted into giggles. No one stopped them. No one found it shameful. At that moment, Kurt stepped forward, his voice cutting through the marina as if he wanted everyone to hear. "Hello, Mountain. Sir, I'm afraid your rod and equipment don't meet club standards. Here, we require professional-grade gear for safety reasons." His tone was velvet smooth, but his gaze was as sharp as a blade. The man simply looked up at Kurt, his eyes calm. "I've read the regulations," he replied slowly, his voice deep and steady. "There's no rule about brands or models, only that rods must be between 6 and 10 feet, hooks must be properly maintained, and lines must be under 30 pounds. Mine meets those requirements." The answer made Kurt hesitate for half a second. Then he forced a thin smile and shifted tactics. "Then, once, please keep your distance. Our members expect a certain standard of atmosphere." A smattering of polite applause followed, as if Kurt had just scored a small victory. The man nodded wordlessly and turned back to focus on the water. But as soon as he looked away, Kurt subtly signaled. A staff member quickly circled behind and dumped leftover food into the water near the man's fishing spot, intending to attract small fish and muddy the water, making it impossible for him to catch anything worthwhile. A petty trap, crude but effective. "Let him sit there all day, catching nothing," Kurt muttered, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. "He'll give up and leave on his own." All eyes remained glued to the man in the faded shirt. None of them could hide their eagerness to watch him fail spectacularly. But they didn't realize the real storm hadn't even begun yet. The entire marina held its breath, watching the quiet man of color sitting silently. Time dragged slowly, as if even the lake itself was holding its breath along with them. 1 hour, then 2. The sun climbed high, casting harsh shadows over every mast, every crisply ironed shirt of the upper-class crowd. And he still sat there, unmoving, like a silent monument. The old fishing line would occasionally twitch, but no prize catch was ever pulled from the water. A group of teenagers lounging nearby with cocktails would glance over now and then, snickering. Probably never held a fishing rod in his life. One of them laughed derisively, shaking his head. "Thinks fishing is as easy as picking up trash." "Huh?" Kurt Benson leaned against the railing, champagne glass in hand, his eyes cold. "Just wait," he thought. Not even a single fish. A total loser. Just as the crowd was growing restless, a shout came from the other end of the dock. "Fish on, fish on." The seasoned anglers began showing off their trophies, huge golden bass glittering in the sunlight. Their rods gleamed, their reels spun effortlessly, their lines taut and polished. The Riverside Club members slapped each other on the back, crowing over their prowess. Each saw himself as the king of the lake, and the man in the faded shirt. Still silent, still patient, But deep within his calm eyes, something had shifted like a still lake, quietly gathering the force of an impending storm. At exactly 11:27 a.m., Kurt Benson descended the steps, striding directly toward him. Still wearing that polite smile, still wielding that patronizing tone laced with contempt. "I'm afraid you're occupying valuable dock space meant for real members," Kurt said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Perhaps it would be best if you let those who actually know how to use it have their turn." A few exchanged glances. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. The man looked up. His gaze was as calm as still water, as if weighing his next move. 1 beat, 2 beats. Then he quietly rose, pulling out a worn leather wallet from his jacket. He opened it and drew out a card. Not a regular membership card, but a Diamond Founder member card reserved only for the original founders of the club. The card shimmered gold under the sun, and every conversation around the marina ground to an instant halt. It was as if the air itself had been sucked out of the world. Kurt froze where he stood. Several people nearby gaped, their mouths hanging open. "It can't be," someone whispered. That's sûr. That's only for the founding investors," or another voice trailed off, breaking apart into stunned silence. The man held the card up in front of Kurt. "I believe I'm qualified," he said, his voice deep and steady as the undisturbed lake. Kurt opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face turned pale, his eyes darted around, desperate for an escape. A silent storm swept through the marina. But the shock wasn't over yet, because after calmly tucking the card away, the man in the faded shirt pulled out a phone and quickly dialed a number. In the distance, a sleek motorboat bearing the Riverside Holdings logo roared toward the dock. Aboard the boat, a group of sharply dressed executives disembarked. Leading them was a distinguished silver-haired man who hurried to greet the man in the faded shirt with utmost reverence. "Welcome, Mr. Jackson Rivers," he announced loudly, his voice filled with respect. "It's an honor to have you visit us today." The name Jackson Rivers dropped onto the marina like a bomb. Everyone froze, because everyone knew that name. The founder of Riverside Holdings, the billionaire behind the entire luxury resort, the golf courses, and the most prestigious club network on the East Coast. The supreme owner, Sir Haffer for the One, the hidden king of their entire glittering world. And this morning, they had laughed at him as if he were some nobody. The atmosphere at the marina exploded. Kurt Benson stood frozen, as if someone had slapped him hard in front of dozens of distinguished members. Whispers and stunned glances pierced through him like icy blades. Jackson Rivers, the unassuming man Kurt had ruthlessly humiliated, turned out to be the very figure everyone at the Riverside Club bowed to with reverence. The billionaire stood there, clad in his simple, faded clothes, his sharp yet composed gaze radiating the calm authority of a man who held their entire fate in his hands. Grant Whitaker, the club's CEO, hurried over, his face pale with embarrassment. "Mr. Rivers," he said, his voice raspy with tension, "if there was any shortcoming in your welcome, we accept full responsibility." Jackson simply offered a slight, amused smile without replying right away. He turned his gaze onto Kurt, a stare cold as a steel blade. Kurt opened his mouth, trying to stammer something, but no words came out. No one came to his rescue now. Not a single soul. The name Benson, once a symbol of authority at the Riverside Club, had been reduced to nothing more than a joke. An old member, Mrs. Eleanor Marshall, stepped forward, her voice icy. "If I recall correctly," she said loudly, "the club's charter clearly states, all members and guests must be treated with absolute respect, regardless of their appearance." Turning to Jackson, she continued, her tone filled with reverence. "Sir, we respectfully request you to address this disgrace." Nods of agreement rippled through the crowd, at first scattered, then swelling into a chorus. The mood shifted from curiosity to righteous indignation. Not because of a minor mistake, but because of an attitude, prejudice, arrogance, the dehumanization of another person. And they knew today they needed to witness justice restored. Jackson lifted his phone. A brief message was sent. Less than 5 minutes later, a sleek black SUV rolled up. Two men in sharp black suits stepped out, moving swiftly and with grim purpose. Kurt trembled as they approached. "Mr. Benson," one of them said, his voice crisp and unwavering. "By order of Mr. Rivers and the Board of Directors, your membership has been revoked. Effective immediately, you are permanently banned from all Riverside properties." The words were sharp, leaving no room for argument. "Wait," Kurt protested, his face flushed red. "You can't." But the gleaming black membership card was already snatched from his hand, swift as a winter gust. The two men escorted him away from the marina under the cold, dispassionate stares of everyone present. No applause, no farewells, only a frigid silence far harsher than any verdict a court could have delivered. Back on the dock, Jackson Rivers remained standing, composed. He turned to face the silent members. "This club," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "was built on respect, fairness, and true passion. No one is allowed to tarnish those values." A thunderous applause erupted, not polite clapping, but heartfelt, resounding applause, a collective acknowledgement that today, Riverside Club has found its soul again. Jackson turned and walked away. His faded clothes blurred into the dazzling sunlight, but his steadfast, proud silhouette was etched deep into the memory of every soul who witnessed that morning. And though the marina was bathed in sunshine and the sound of gentle waves, everyone knew a new chapter had begun. For Riverside Club, for every person who stood there that day, and for all those who had ever believed that fine suits and gilded fishing rods defined a person's worth. The atmosphere at Riverside Club seemed to have calmed after the morning's shock. But Jackson Rivers knew every calm sea hides another storm, and that storm was coming fast. Just a few hours after the incident, an emergency meeting was convened in the main hall. All senior members, the very names who once believed themselves entitled and untouchable, were required to attend. Grant Whitaker, the club's director, sat tensely next to Jackson. "Mr. Rivers," Grant said in a low voice, "I'm afraid what happened today is just the tip of the iceberg." Jackson nodded slightly. "I know," he replied, his eyes flashing cold steel. "It's time to clean house. Ate from the roots." The grand hall glittered under the crystal chandeliers, but the tension was so heavy it felt almost tangible. The once arrogant faces from yesterday now showed only anxiety and unease. As Jackson stepped up to the podium, the room felt deathly silent. He needed no introduction, no gavel to call order. His gaze, direct and merciless, was enough to command absolute attention. "I shouldn't have to remind you," Jackson began, "that the Riverside Club was founded not only to celebrate sporting passion, but to honor human dignity. And yet, what I witnessed today," he paused, his eyes sweeping the room, causing many to lower their heads, "reveals rot at the very core." The murmuring died down completely. No one dared object. "I have quietly initiated an internal audit," Jackson continued, his voice cold and steady, like the edge of a blade. "And what we uncovered goes far beyond discrimination." A massive screen behind him flickered to life. Images of payroll records, suspicious expenses, shady reports. Each line, each document, projected clearly for all to see. Membership funds siphoned off. Exclusive training sessions rigged for the elite behind the board's back. Fishing tournaments blatantly fixed to boost the reputations of a select few. Each revelation landed like a slap across the faces of those gathered. Some began fumbling, hastily trying to leave the room. But it was too late. The evidence had been sealed, and the Riverside Club would no longer serve as a playground for corruption. Jackson stepped down from the podium, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence. He didn't need to say another word. The truth had spoken. Each member, each staffer, knew either change or be gone. Some tried to defend themselves, offering flimsy excuses. Grant Whitaker, now regaining his firmness, stepped forward and crushed any attempts at denial. Anyone involved will be suspended immediately. An independent investigation will follow. And if anyone feels they cannot align with the new direction of Riverside Club, he paused, flashing a sharp, cold smile. The door is always open. Outside the hall, the golden sunset spilled over the marina. Jackson Rivers stood alone, hands in his pockets, gazing out over the shimmering waters. Grant approached, standing silently beside him for a long while. "We'll have to rebuild from scratch," Grant finally said softly. Jackson nodded. "Even better," he replied, his voice gravelly. "A clean foundation is the only place a true legend can be built." Grant looked at him with deep respect. They both knew the road ahead would not be easy. But at least today, Riverside had chosen the right path. The path of truth, the path of fairness, the path of pride over pretense. And it all began with one man, wearing a faded shirt, holding a battered fishing rod, and carrying a spirit that would never bow. The sunset hadn't even faded from the lake, but the Riverside Club had already changed entirely. Today, the day of truth was not over. It was only just beginning. The next morning, every member received an urgent email. Notice of complete restructuring, mandatory attendance for new selection session. Time, determined at 1:00 a.m. Location on Inoan, Suramananon. Main hall, attendance required. The subject line cut through all pretense like a knife. Grant Whitaker stood on the high podium, but this time, he wasn't standing alone. Beside him, Jackson Rivers, dressed simply in a crisp white shirt, stood silently like a monument. No longer the fisherman from the day before. Now, he was the true master of the Riverside Club. And those who didn't meet the new standard would be swept away like autumn leaves. Grant opened the session with a short, sharp declaration. Starting today, Riverside Club will undergo a complete organizational restructuring. Every position, from management to instructors, must reapply. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Some faces turned pale. Others showed signs of anger and resentment, but no one dared object. Projected boldly across the massive screen behind them were two cold, unforgiving statements. Any discrimination, fraud, or self-dealing will result in immediate and permanent expulsion. No more privileges, no more exceptions. The selection process unfolded like a grueling examination. Applicants had to present their professional competencies, their vision for contributing to the club, their commitment to core values, fairness, respect, integrity. Grant sat at the head table, but the final decision belonged to Jackson Rivers. One by one, candidates stepped forward to present. Each was given a single chance. No backtracking, no bargaining, no pulling strings. When Dave, the former fishing dock manager who had openly sneered at Jackson, stepped up, the entire hall held its breath. Dave forced a strained smile and said with oily enthusiasm, "I pledge to serve Riverside to the best of my ability, just as I always have." Jackson silently nodded to Grant. Grant opened a thick file. "Mr. Dave," he said, voice cold and impersonal. "Upon review of member complaints, we found 17 recorded violations of conduct, including discriminatory remarks, abuse of authority, and manipulation of tournament outcomes." Dave turned ghostly pale. I can explain," he stammered. Jackson cut him off, his voice calm yet absolute. "No need. Riverside no longer has a place for people like you." Grant nodded once. "Your membership account is frozen. Your contract terminated immediately." Dave slumped off stage, gray-faced. A few sympathetic glances followed him, but no one dared intervene. The great cleansing had begun. One after another, those who had relied on privileged family names, wealth, old alliances were cast out like dead leaves in winter. Only those who truly loved Riverside, who truly wished to build it anew, were allowed to stay. Many young faces, those who had been sidelined and underestimated, now stepped up one after another, confidently sharing their dreams. Jackson listened attentively, warmth flickering in his eyes. In them, he saw sparks of hope, the very flame Riverside had long since forgotten. That afternoon, Riverside Club rewrote its own history. A new leadership board was posted outside the hall. New leadership board, appointments following the 2025 restructuring. Grant Whitaker, Gonerer, Chief Executive Officer. Sarah Price, Director of Training Academy, once ousted by the old cliques. Daniel Brooks, new fishing dock manager, once dismissed for cultural mismatch. And many other names fresh, determined, full of ambition. At the bottom of the announcement board, a small line read like a whispered vow. From today onward, Riverside Club no longer belongs to the wealthy, it belongs to those rich in spirit. Jackson finished reading, a faint smile crossing his lips. That day, Riverside Club was truly reborn. No more privilege, no more discrimination, only passion, perseverance, and true pride remained. And it all started with one humble man, a battered old fishing rod, and a heart that had never forgotten the most important truth. Respect not money is what defines real worth. The great cleansing had ended, but the true transformation was only just beginning. On Monday morning, Jackson Rivers sat in the new director's office, a room that once flaunted luxury, now stripped down under his hand, keeping only what was necessary. On the desk, he laid out two things: a plan for Riverside's complete restructuring, a crumpled, time-worn letter. That letter was the last memento from his late father, the man who once worked as a janitor at Riverside, but who, throughout his life, was never allowed to step into the members' area. One day, son, make Riverside a place where everyone is respected, not just those who can afford to smile. Jackson gripped the letter tightly. Today, that promise would finally begin to take shape. By afternoon, every Riverside employee received a new announcement. Official launch of the Open Riverside program. Free basic fishing training for the local community. New memberships will be evaluated based on character, passion, and commitment, not wealth or status. Attached was an open letter signed by Jackson Rivers. We open our arms to those who love nature, who cherish fairness. No designer suits needed, no luxury cars at the gate, only a love for the water, the sky, and respect for those around you. The letter quickly went viral across social media. Within 24 hours, Riverside became a phenomenon. Thousands of supportive comments flooded in. Hundreds of people from across the state registered to join. A new wave was coming, not for prestige, but for the longing to belong somewhere real. But change was never easy. Many old members, those who had long basked in privilege, fought back fiercely. They organized secret meetings, filed formal complaints to the board. They threatened, if ordinary people were let in, Riverside would lose its status. If the gates opened too wide, its traditions would collapse. At the hearing, Jackson sat quietly across from them. On one side, expensive suits, sharp voices. On the other, one. Jackson simple, composed, carrying a thick folder. When asked to speak, he only said one sentence. If Riverside is only for the wealthy, it died a long time ago. I'm not rebuilding Riverside to protect pride. I'm rebuilding Riverside to save its soul. Then, Jackson calmly presented. Years of discrimination complaints spanning a decade. Misappropriated funds linked to special interest groups. A new survey shows that 78% of the local community supports the Open Riverside program. No one could argue further. When the hearing concluded, the board voted. 9 out of 10 in favor of the restructuring. Riverside Club officially reborn. On the first day of the Open Riverside program, the lakefront scene was breathtaking. Poor children, holding fishing rods for the first time, laughed gleefully across the water. Elderly residents from nursing homes sat peacefully with rods in hand, eyes sparkling like children again. Veterans with worn jackets and trembling hands gripped the fishing rods Jackson personally handed them, their eyes blazing like young soldiers heading into their first battle. No one cared what brand someone wore. No one asked what kind of car someone drove. There were only smiles. Only laughter, ringing across the shimmering lake. Far off, Grant Whitaker and Jackson Rivers stood silently, watching. Grant whispered, "I used to think Riverside was a privilege to be guarded tightly. But the truth is, Riverside only lives when it becomes the pride of everyone." Jackson smiled softly. "We didn't lose Riverside. We saved it." The sun dipped low, painting the lake a brilliant red. The breeze stirred the new signs posted along the waterfront. "Welcome home. No judgment. Only passion." Beneath the signs, children ran freely, their laughter echoing like a never-ending anthem. And in the hearts of everyone, from the youngest to the oldest, Riverside Club became something far greater than just a fishing club. It became a true home, a sanctuary for kind souls, a place where even the simplest dreams were cherished. 1 month after Riverside officially opened its doors, the changes had become a tidal wave. The story of the black man who disguised himself as a poor fisherman to expose the elitist prejudice was picked up by major television networks. Newspapers from Boston to San Francisco ran front-page stories. A Riverside, from a club of privilege to a symbol of community. Crowds flocked to Riverside nonstop. On some days, the parking lot overflowed. On some evenings, the lakeshore was filled with laughter like a grand festival. People didn't come just to fish. They came to rediscover simple yet sacred values. Welcome, distinct, respect, and the dream of a place where everyone truly belongs. At the Riverside Rebirth celebration, Jackson Rivers stepped onto a small stage set by the lake. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a simple white shirt and old canvas shoes, a reminder that true power doesn't lie in clothes, but in the heart. The crowd fell silent as he picked up the microphone. Jackson scanned the sun-drenched field, packed with thousands of people. His eyes paused on every face. An elderly man once denied membership for being unworthy. An 8-year-old girl clutching a broken fishing rod, grinning like she just caught the biggest fish in the world. A grizzled old soldier in a faded military jacket, silently casting his line into the water. They were all here, and Riverside finally belonged to them. Jackson began. "When I was a boy, my father worked here as a janitor, but despite sweeping every stone, he was never allowed into the members area. He passed away, carrying an unfulfilled dream, that one day, Riverside would open its arms to everyone." Jackson paused, his voice deepening. "Today, I'm proud to say, that dream has come true." The crowd exploded into thunderous applause, but he raised his hand, gently signaling for quiet, and smiled. And the most beautiful thing isn't that Riverside changed, it's that we changed Riverside. This time, the applause never stopped. Immediately after his speech, an unexpected event unfolded. Grant Whitaker, the former club director, walked up the stage, holding a wooden plaque. He handed it to Jackson as thousands watched with emotion. The plaque read, "Riverside, where every heart finds a home." Grant, choking with emotion, said, "Today, I voluntarily step into the background, so that Riverside's new journey, guided by the right people, can continue. People like you." A heavy whirl, golden silence fell. Then, a wave of cheers burst forth, shaking the entire field. That night, Riverside Lake shimmered under rows of lanterns strung along the shore. Families spread out picnic blankets. Groups of young friends held friendly fishing competitions. Elders sipped tea and shared stories under the moonlight. At a quiet corner of the lawn, Jackson sat with a few old friends, former humble employees once sneered at by the elites. They watched the children playing under the trees, places once reserved only for the wealthy. An elderly staff member said slowly, "You turned Riverside into something we only dared to dream about." Jackson smiled softly. "No, we did it together. He raised his coffee cup. The moonlight glinted off the cup. The lake rippled, reflecting the light. Because in the end, it's not money, it's trust, kindness, and courage that truly build a home. And Riverside, from a club of privilege, had truly become a shared home for all resilient, kind-hearted souls. a place where simplicity was honored, a place where even the most modest dreams were ignited, a place where laughter, dreams, and friendships would forever echo like a triumphant anthem across the crystal waters. There are places you visit just to pass time, but there are places you visit to find yourself. Today, Riverside isn't just a lakeside retreat. It stands as proof that no matter who you are, where you come from, or what clothes you wear, you deserve respect. You deserve to belong. And if you believe that kindness can change the world, if you believe that the simplest things hold the greatest power, please like this story. Please share it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next journey that will move your heart. Because where there is kindness, there is always home.